Okay, let's just jump right in with a pretty wild idea. What if the thing you're most proud of, your kindness, is actually, well, what if it's destroying you? I know, it sounds counterintuitive, but stick with me, because that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
So, I want you to think about your own life for a second. Is your kindness a bridge, or is it a flood? I mean, does it connect you to people in a way that feels good and strong, or does it feel more like a flood, just overwhelming everything and leaving you totally wiped out? Really think about that, because figuring out the answer, well, it can change everything.
We're taught our whole lives to be nice, right? But here's the catch. There can be a real dark side to being too nice. It's this idea that your kindness, when it's just completely unchecked, can actually end up being a form of self-destruction. And that's the core of what we're getting into.
I like to call this the kindness paradox, and honestly, the best way to get our heads around it is with a simple story. So, let's talk about Daniel. Daniel's a great guy, a real giver. Probably reminds you of someone you know, maybe even yourself. And his story is just a perfect metaphor for how being super generous can totally backfire, and more importantly, what you can do to fix it. All right, so first let's paint a picture of what this looks like when it's going right. We're going to call this the river of kindness. This is the goal, right? This is kindness that's healthy and doesn't burn you out. So I want you to imagine that your kindness, all of it, is this huge, powerful river. It's just flowing from you out into the world. It's this amazing, life-giving force, just brimming with potential. But here's the thing about a healthy river, right? It's at its absolute best when it has strong banks to guide it. And your kindness is exactly the same. When it has some direction, it can nourish everything it touches. Your friends, your job, your family. And the best part is, it doesn't leave you completely drained. So what are these riverbanks I'm talking about? Well, they're your boundaries. And look, boundaries get a bad rap. They are not walls to keep people out. Think of them as the structures that give your kindness focus and power. They're what protect you from totally burning out, so you can actually give the best parts of yourself to the people who really count. Okay, but what happens when those banks aren't there? Or when they break? This is where Daniel's story really takes a turn, because his beautiful river of kindness, it's about to become a totally destructive flood. Look, we all have storms in our lives, right? You get hit with unexpected demands, a crisis pops up, or you run into people who just take and take and take. For Daniel, who had basically no boundaries, these storms weren't just tough, they were completely devastating. He was just wide open to it all. And this is what happens next. With nothing to guide it, his kindness turns into a flood. And you know what this feels like, right? It's saying yes to one more project at work until you're completely swamped. It's spending your entire weekend helping a friend move when you were already running on fumes. For Daniel, this flood just washed away everything. His time, his energy, his own well-being. It basically left him with nothing. So after the flood, what's left? Daniel is just wrecked. He's completely depleted. He's starting to feel resentful, which is a feeling he hates. And the worst part? He has absolutely nothing left to give. He's just broken. But this isn't the end of the story, because hitting rock bottom like this, it leads to a huge realization. This is where he discovers the real power of boundaries. So when he's at his lowest point, a wise friend named Mr. Harris tells him something that just changes everything. He says, Daniel, the problem isn't your river, it's your riverbanks. And wow, just think about that. The issue was never his kindness. That was his strength. The problem was that it had no structure. He wasn't too kind. He was just poorly contained. So how do you come back from that? Well, the answer isn't to dam up the river and stop being kind. Not at all. It's about rebuilding those banks, and this time making them stronger than ever. And the process is actually pretty straightforward, but it's incredibly powerful. First step, you just have to look around and acknowledge the damage. Be honest about what the flood has cost you. Second, you define your circle, like who and what are your true priorities. And third, you start the real work, rebuilding those banks. And that means learning to say no sometimes and protecting your own time and energy. I mean, it really boils down to this simple, powerful equation. Kindness without boundaries equals self-destruction. If you take one thing away from Daniel's story, from this whole explainer, let it be that. And this right here just lays it all out, side by side. On the one hand, with no boundaries, you've got a flood. The result? Self-destruction and burnout. But on the other hand, with boundaries, you have a river. The result? self-preservation, and a kind of generosity that you can sustain for a lifetime. It's the choice between one big destructive mess and a whole life of making a real positive impact.
So let's bring it back to you. We all have that river of kindness inside of us. The real question is, are you letting it guide you, or are you guiding it? Take a hard look at your own life. Where do you need to build up your riverbanks? Where are things starting to flood over? And most importantly, what's your first step going to be to fix it?